so that's how we need to speak into these cultural issues. That's how we need to speak into the lives of the people that we deem as weird because our culture is totally different from their culture. They grew up in a different part of town that makes them act a little different, that makes them have a different perception on life.
You know, there's a lot going on in culture right now that the church has to deal with and contend with. What are some of these issues that you're seeing popping up in the culture outside of the church that we're having to deal with right now? And on some of those things, what do you think is the best way for the church to deal with these issues?
So there's two questions there, at least I'm gonna try to answer. The first question is how should church deal with cultural issues that pop up? One, I think there's a grave, we do a grave disservice to the culture when we make church about the performance purely and strictly about looking the greatest that you'll ever look during the week. I think we do the people a grave disservice because people who don't know God walk in and think this is how these people act, and they must be better than me, and then they see them out during the week and they realize they're just human beings too. We're all on this journey and we all have the sanctification process to go through as Christians. But as a church, I think we need to respond with a balance of grace and truth. And again, I don't have the answers to all of that, but I think quite often we let one overbalance the other. I love the verse when it talks about Jesus came full of grace and truth. If he came with too much grace, he wouldn't have talked about sin. He wouldn't have exposed hell. He wouldn't have exposed the misdeeds of the nation. But if he came in too much truth, he would have beat down that nation, because rightfully so, and based on the justice of God, he could have called fire and brimstone down on them.
Yeah.
So the grace and truth balance is something that I think we as the church lack and need to improve on and strive to improve on every day, because I don't think any of us could necessarily arrive, but make that the focus point. Is to be more like Christ, we need a balance of grace and truth. And so that's how we need to speak into these cultural issues. That's how we need to speak into the lives of the people that we deem as weird because our culture is totally different from their culture. They grew up in a different part of town that makes them act a little different, that makes them have a different perception on life. Get through the weeds of certain things, because sometimes it is just a cultural preference and not something that's wrong. And so I think the church and the culture in regards to any issue, whether it's trying to talk about sex outside of marriage, whether it's trying to talk about the drug wars, whether it's trying to talk about sin in general, the 10 Commandments, the foundations of the country that we live in here in America, each of us need to strive to come at these issues with grace and truth, knowing that when we don't have the answers, he's got the answers, and sometimes we need to admit when we're wrong and know that we don't have the answers, and balance the addressing with grace and truth.
Dude, I'm getting fed this morning. That is so profound, the grace and truth, and that's something that I'm going to chew on, and would encourage everybody that's watching and listening to chew on that as well, the grace and truth, because you're so right. Jesus could have just, when he came, could have annihilated everything, because everything is just completely off. And I think a lot of times we see ourselves as believers as the ones that have to be the hot and heavy and, negate the grace. And we do a lot of destruction. Then there's the opposite end of it, where we just let everything, anything goes, and it's okay. And it's finding that balance, and that takes time to arrive at. It really does.